Hello and welcome to Stylish Chats with Creatives. Today on the podcast, I'm speaking to Ed Godden. Ed is a documentary wedding photographer. He's in the top 50 British wedding photographers of 2022, I did notice on your Instagram. And he captures honest, raw, real, fun moments and has shot over 600 weddings. Hello and welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I could not believe that you have shot over 600 weddings. That's insane.
Yeah, it's a big old number, that, isn't it? It's going back a lot of years, but in the early days, it was very sporadic and only a few a year. When I was a press photographer, I was only doing them in the summer, and then just over the last 10, 12 years, that is when the majority of those ones have happened, and that is an insane amount, isn't it? When somebody else says it and you hear it.
Yeah, like in my head, I'm like, you've dealt with 600 brides and their mums.
I know, and not one of them has failed to turn up. Can you believe it? 600 weddings and there's never been a no-show.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah, you see it on all the soaps, don't you? Where like the bride gets cold feet or the groom doesn't turn up. Well, that's never happened to any of the 600 plus weddings that I've shot. Still time.
There's still time there. So how did you become a press photographer? Talk me through how photography came in your life.
Well, I had always been interested in photography as a teenager, even when I was at secondary school. Did the usual thing of my dad giving me his camera when he didn't want to use it anymore. Then I got to the age when I was going to college, I had to decide what to do alongside my English A-level and media studies, because I originally wanted to be a journalist. I wanted to be a sports reporter. But there was a really good photography course going on as well. I started doing that, and I kind of had an inkling that the photography was going to take over because it was part of the media studies course as well. And I just became massively obsessed with photography very quick, and everything else just didn't matter to me at all. Like the English completely suffered, the media studies, other than the photography element of it, suffered, and I just wanted to be a photographer. And within a year of being at college, I managed to get a job at a local newspaper because I took a photograph at the local horse racing of Willie Carson, the jockey, when he fell off his horse. I was the only photographer at the paddock because all the other proper photographers that weren't doing college courses, the professionals, they were out at the track getting ready to photograph the race. So I got photographs of the paramedics working on him, putting a neck brace on it, and it kind of ended up being the fall that ended his career, kind of. I was the only photographer that took it. I edited the picture. Well, didn't edit them. I took the roll of film home, developed it, printed it, and then dropped it off at the local newspaper after my dad suggested me doing that. I went on holiday for a week, came back. I had a check for £50 from the local newspaper, and the picture that I took, big on the front cover of the newspaper. And within that envelope was a letter saying, "Did you want to come in for an interview?" So it all just landed on my lap very, very, very nicely. And I worked for that newspaper for 4 years. Yeah, it was as bonkers as that.
I'm literally like gobsmacked. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, right place, right time. If my dad hadn't have said, because we were going on holiday the next day for a week to Cornwall, and he just said, "Why don't you see if the local newspaper are interested?" And I thought, well, it's not that good a picture. And then I thought, well, I was the only photographer there. He's a well-known sports personality. Happened at the local racecourse at Newbury Racecourse. And yeah, I was more blown away by the fact that not my picture was used massive on a broadsheet newspaper, but my name was really tiny underneath. I was like, yeah, look at that, my name. and 50 quid check, which to a 17-year-old back in the 90s, 50 quid check went a hell of a long way.
Yeah, I bet. Like, I remember in the 90s when I was growing up and we were given like a fiver as pocket money, felt incredible, let alone 50 quid.
Yeah, fiver went a long way. 50 quid definitely went a long way. Yeah, and I worked for the Newbury Weekly News for 4 years. Really, really enjoyed that. That was better than any university degree that I could have got in photography. It was just learning on the job, learning from your mistakes, learning from definitely the bottom up, because you're just doing trashy jobs day after day, and then every now and again you'd get like a celebrity job, or you get a royal visit because it was down in Berkshire. We were shooting royals a lot, and then you'd occasionally get a really, really good news scoop, photograph some horrific jobs as well. And considering I was only 17 to 20, I worked there from 17 to 21. I photographed the Ufton Nervit train crash when I was only 21, 22, which was when I think it was seven people died when somebody parked their car on they just to commit suicide. They just parked the car on the rails. Train hit the car and it derailed, and all the coaches came off. It was on the national news, and I was one of the first photographers when I saw it on the news to get down there to get photos of the wreckage and everything. And it was horrific, and that those pictures were used in the newspaper. We'd have jobs like that. Jobs like the Newbury bypass being built. I was always going up there photographing like Swampy and all the other protesters. One of my biggest jobs was the protests up at Newbury bypass. And you got to think, when you're only 17, 18, stuff like that is so hard hitting and exciting, but at the same time you're kind of too young to understand the gravity of it all, and like especially when like death is involved and you're photographing, because local newspapers are always photographing things like car crashes, and we were doing things like that as well just to fill the newspapers. It's mental to think that. I don't know if that happens with local newspapers anymore, but the local newspapers were very, very different in the 90s to kind of what they are now. So I did that for 7-8 years, and I worked for the national newspapers, for agencies, and again that was just a wide variety of jobs: Premiership football matches, celebrities. Very rarely having a day off. I think the longest stint I did without a day off was about 6 months, just because I was so obsessed with the job. Yeah, it paid appalling, but it was just such a interesting job. And when you're so keen at being a professional photographer and being that young and just really enjoying it, I loved every minute of it. And I did that for 12, 13 years before working for photography magazines for 3-4 years. First of all, digital camera down in Bath for Future Publishing. Then I moved to Peterborough to work for Practical Photography magazine, which was a magazine I always read as a teenager. So it was very, very weird working for the magazine that I was obsessed with as a teenager. I love that job. And then, back in 12, 13 years ago, I went full time with just doing wedding photography, just because I wanted to use my press experience into becoming a documentary wedding photographer. I didn't want to shoot weddings the way that I had shot weddings occasionally in the summer months when I was a press photographer, where everything was very traditional, very grip and grin, very staged. I just wanted to shoot documentary style weddings. And that's how I shoot now, and it's the only way I know and want to shoot. I don't shoot weddings that are very at all contrived. I don't attract couples that want perfection. They want the raw story. They want a real story, and they just want authentic photos. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think we were saying just before we press record, me and my husband were looking at our remembering the pictures of our like family weddings, you know, like mums and dads and, you know, aunties and uncles. And back in the day, they were very like stand there and smile and like look stiff as a board. And actually now, when I look back at like our wedding pictures, and we had a friend shoot our wedding, but he just whipped around with the camera, was just, you know, documentary kind of style. We did have the odd, you know, a whole family gather kind of, you know, you got to appease the grandparents. But yeah, it's so much nicer. So much nicer. And I think some of the shots you've got of like kids being cheeky, or like a wedding guest, like amazing shoes, or like just capturing moments. And I think that's the whole part of a wedding, isn't it? It's not all about the formality. The formality is great, but you're really there to like have a massive party, aren't you, really?
Oh, totally. I've missed the first kiss shot before because the bride and groom's kids been picking their nose behind me, and I've had to make that snap decision as to me I have Zoom calls with my couples when they inquire with me, so I can get to see if there's a good connection, if I'm the right photographer for them, if we're on the same page, and then I'll have a catch up Zoom the week or two before the wedding, and you see a slightly different kind of, sometimes a bit more nervous couple, but they're also excited for their wedding day, and hopefully they're excited that they still booked me. And then on the wedding day, I kind of know the couples a bit by then. I'm still a stranger turning up to shoot their wedding. Don't get me wrong, but and they're a stranger to me, and all their guests definitely are. But if I can make that snap decision of like, oh well, the guys want a picture of their kid picking their nose at this very fun, very apt time, or do they want the first kiss shot? And I just remember sacrificing that shot for the kid picking his nose with the church as a lovely background. And I remember after that wedding, the bride just saying, "I'm so glad you chose that shot over us just having a snog that we do on a very regular basis anyway." So it's all about when you're photographing documentary style, you're having to work very quickly as to what you think is the most important picture to tell the best story and the best narrative of the day. And a lot of that does come down to my press background, how I've taken that into weddings. There's no way that I could have just gone, I'm going to be a wedding photographer, because a lot of people that do that, they become wedding photographers, but they don't know their style. They don't know what route they're going to go down, or they think they've seen documentary photography shot nicely, so they're going to shoot it that way. But I think unless you've got a grounding, or unless you've done something else in the past, it's difficult to just pick up this style of photography. Some people are very, very good at it, very quick. And especially with the equipment that we have nowadays, it's definitely made the job a lot easier.
Yeah, I think the styles have definitely changed. I think as well, like you say, you need some sort of eye for documentary photography. Even if you're doing
Yeah,
it not outside of weddings, you still need to have that eye of being like, oh, I've just spotted that, or I've just spotted that. It's like that constant
yeah.
observation.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah, you have to have the eye, and you have to have empathy as well. I think as a documentary wedding photographer, you can't just be a stone cold, heartless person. You got to enjoy weddings. You got to. My take on the documentary side is definitely the fun element of weddings. Other documentary photographers concentrate on the light. Sometimes they're all about the styling of how the couple have gone into it. But the majority of documentary wedding photographers are doing it for the story and the true story of the couple's personality coming out in the pictures. And I like to think that mine's just an amalgamation of all of them, but with fun as like the main element. I don't. How many times I use the word fun in my website? It's probably a ridiculous amount. It's just to ram it down the throats of people that are inquiring. This is what you're going to get. You're not going to get fine art from me. I can do the fine art element to the documentary pictures if the lighting allows me, and if the mood of the moment, if it's an emotional moment, I will probably shoot it in a more fine art way. But at the same time, I'm not looking out for those quiet, intimate moments 24/7. I'm looking out for the fun first and foremost.
So, do you have a second shooter who shoots with you on your weddings?
Not, I'd say 95% of the weddings I shoot on my own. I mean, I shot 20 weddings last year, and only one wedding did they book a second photographer. They asked for a second photographer to be to come along, and that was just because it was logistically impossible for me to do bridal prep and groom prep. They were so far apart. There was absolutely no way. Plus, they had 140 guests, and I tend to say if you have over 120 guests, it might be worth considering me looking at getting a second photographer. And then I just have a few that I've worked with regularly in the past that I can recommend, and they shoot in a similar style to me.
Yeah, I think it's second shooters. It's helpful, like you say, if you've got a logistics kind of issue. If everyone's at the same venue and it's like you can easily go jump between rooms, it's quite easy.
Yeah, it really is. It's a few years ago, back in 2016, 2017. um, I had somebody working with me who was helping me out with the editing, because I used to shoot an insane amount of weddings each year. I'm talking like 50, 58 weddings a year. I don't shoot anywhere near that now. It's nearer the 20 number. Um, so because that she was doing that, she was also second shooting with me a lot, and it was kind of just because I didn't want to burn out. So I was just thinking, well, sometimes if the couple hadn't even requested a second photographer, I'd be like, I've got 3 weddings back to back. I'm going to need some help on these weddings, otherwise I'm going to be useless. And then that's never a good review, a Google review to get. It's just like, yeah, he turned up. He looked as haggard as fuck. It's just like, I don't want that. I don't want that review appearing anywhere. So it was kind of just like I was giving couples a second shooter occasionally, but we're talking a long time ago. And now I couldn't even imagine shooting 58 weddings in a year. I don't know how I did it. Now we know how we got to that 600 figure, don't we? So, but
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I did 3 years on the trot, which was some like 58 weddings, 53, and then 50. And I think the year that I did 58 weddings, 4 couples split up and cancelled. So that should have been over 60 that I should have shot that year.
Whoa.
But I know some photographers that shoot 80 plus weddings, and I hats off to them if they do it and if they still enjoy it. I just know that I couldn't at my age now, even though I feel fitter now than I have done ever. I look after my body, and I don't abuse my body anywhere near like I did when I was in my 20s and 30s. But I could just never shoot those numbers nowadays. 20 is just such a nice number for me.
Yeah, I think it's finding that work-life balance as well. And I think you're so right when you can feel burnout coming, especially
Yeah.
as a creative, because our work goes in like, I call it like a little roller coaster. You have like months where you're up and you're so busy, you don't get a day off, and then you're down. You need that time in between those like busy periods to just go, oh fuck, like I just need a break. I just need half a day or like a day to catch up. So it's quite
Yeah.
like, quite good of you to have done that, really.
Yeah, well, nowadays my warning sign's the mirror. It's kind of just like if like the years that like after COVID, it was just like the year after COVID, I had 50 weddings in the second half of the year. So I did 50 weddings just between May and Christmas. You know, when we were allowed to shoot weddings again, and then the following year, 2022, I shot 50 weddings throughout the whole year, which was hard enough. But yeah, the 50 I did in 6 months. I just did it just because I was happy to be working again and money was coming back into the business. But looking back on it now, it's possibly why it just seems so far away. 2020 does, because mind was just. But the weird thing is, I look back at the work that I produced over those 2 years after COVID, and it's some of the best photography I've ever done, because maybe it's because I was under pressure. Maybe it's just because I had pretty much a year off during 2020, and it was just like an admin year of trying to keep all my couples happy and keeping them all on board, and I certainly didn't have any of these greys in my beard pre 2020.
I do think though COVID changed a lot for a lot of creatives, and it feels like it was a blink of an eye ago, but actually we're still feeling it in our industry.
Yeah, financially not so much, but definitely just from the fact that this year's very quiet for me, and it is across the industry. A lot of people saying, "Oh, it's looking up." My inquiries now, I'm not getting any more inquiries for this year, so I think this year is going to stay at where it is, and I'm fine with that. It'd be nice to have a bit of a more chilled out year this year, but next year my inquiries are starting to snowball in a bit now. It was very quiet beginning of this year. I hardly had any inquiries January, February, and March. Kept checking my inquiry form to see if it was bust, because it was just like nothing was coming in. And then luckily over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've taken 3 bookings that have just come out of nowhere, just from recommendations of other people that I've shot their weddings. But yeah, I know what you mean. It was bonkers to think it was 4 years ago now.
Yeah, and like to think it's still affecting our businesses now. Like I definitely see it because I work in studios, and you see it with the range of products that are coming in. That's lower. Obviously, when COVID was happening, they weren't shipping out stuff across the world, so
Yeah.
you definitely see it, and you definitely still feel it. But that's interesting that your work has picked up Mine was quiet at the beginning of the year as well. And it's interesting, they both kind of picked up, despite being in separate
Yeah,
industries, they've picked up at the same time.
yeah, because normally this time of the year, previous years, I mean, I've been doing the weddings now for 11, 12 years, just weddings. Normally, I'd have taken like 8 to 10 bookings by the first of what we're just coming into May, and I would have normally taken 8 to 10 bookings for either this year or the following year. But hardly anything came in the first few months. For the last couple of weeks, I've taken 3 bookings. It's There's no pattern to this job at all. And I know a lot of photographers that love the business side of this job, and they just see it as a game. And while I don't like games, I'm not a competitive person. I've got a competitive bone in my body, and when it comes to that game being paying your mortgage and putting food on the table for your kids, it's one of those things where you're kind of just like, well, I'm glad I had a really, really busy last 2 years, because it means that I can kind of take my foot off the gas a bit this year with the work front, but the marketing has still got to be there and as a back burner. And I'm still very present on social media, trying to get the weddings to come in. And the majority of my work is from recommendations. So getting the Google reviews, putting stuff out on social media, coming across with the work that I want to put out, and hoping that others buy into that is the only way that I know how to work. Really, I'm not big on the world's worst salesman. On a Zoom call with an inquiry, I never expect an answer at the end of the 40-minute Zoom call. I would cringe if a couple were just like, "Do we have to give you an answer?" And I'll be no. Just go away, think about it, because I'm not stupid. Most people have got 2 or 3 other photographers to chat to. It's there's so many photographers out there nowadays. You'd be pretty naive to think that, well, I'm the only one they've contacted me, so of course they're going to book me. That's just not the case anymore. Like a while ago, if you got an inquiry and somebody wanted to contact you and then chat to you, you kind of 75% of the way there. You knew that they were really interested. Whereas now there's just so many to choose from and so many different styles. So it's a lot harder to get the bookings nowadays. I don't care what anyone says. It's a lot harder to get the bookings.
I think as well, like people's budgets are different now. My cousin got married in 2012-ish, maybe 2015. And she spent a fuck ton on her wedding. And I don't know if people are still spending like 50 grand on their wedding or not.
Yeah, my couples, because again, going back to the fun element, you could be the richest person in the world and have loads of fun, and you could be scrimping by month with like pretty much spending your wages within 48 hours of getting your pay packet, but still know how to have loads of fun. So it's kind of like my couples is such a broad range of people, and it's kind of what keeps me doing this year after year. I could be shooting like an absolutely loaded couple in their family home down in Oxfordshire with like 160 guests, 2 marquees in their back garden, and a massive band and all that, and they'd pay me the same amount of money as a couple getting married in a village hall out in the middle of nowhere in Derbyshire, that are earning what I was earning when I was a press photographer, yet they see the value in wedding photography, and they really, really want amazing images captured. And I'll be turning up to their wedding, and I might be the most expensive thing that they've bought for their wedding. I might be the most expensive supplier. Yet at that wedding down in Oxfordshire, where like money is no object, I could be the cheapest thing at their wedding, yet they're still invested in good photography. Do you know what I mean? It's all or nothing with my couples. There's occasionally the in between, but with documentary photography, people really value good photography, and I love the fact that when I get an inquiry and it's like, oh, it's just at a village hall. Are you interested in that? I'm like, hell yeah! It's just like your money's the same as like me doing a massive venue in London that's like a 6-figure wedding, but yours might be like a 10, 15 grand wedding. You've got your dress off vintage, your shoes from Primark. You're not going on honeymoon because you've spent it all on making sure that you're having a free bar and all your mates get pissed. I'm there to capture that. It's the people that make the wedding, not the venues are so irrelevant to me. Honestly, it beggars belief why some photographers. I'm not shooting at that venue. It's a dive and all that, and I'm just like, it's about the people. It's the people that make the weddings. I mean, if the venue, don't get me wrong, if the venue you shot at before and it attracted the wrong crowd, that might put you off. Yeah, I'll go back on what I said there a bit, but it does generally tend to be about the people and not the color of their money, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think like if you've got uh, a good collection of people, like I circle back to ours, we had a great time. You know, the security kicked us out at 2 a.m. They were like, "We are done with your shit dancing. Get out."
Yeah, not because there was any trouble.
No, just because they're like, "We want to go home."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You've got your
But I
money's
think
worth.
people, yeah, that's it. I think some people, as long as they value your work, because it's not just you turning up and shooting for 12 hours, it's the 2 weeks that you're editing and
Yeah.
retouching and sending them files and all that other stuff as well, the background stuff, as long as they're valuing your time and, you know, they're good fun. We've said fun about 200 times, haven't we, already?
Yeah, nearly as many times as it's on my homepage. Yeah, yeah. It's so important to me, and it's kind of like you could do a Zoom call with a couple as well, and if they were saying that they saw something, if they were saying, "Oh, could you do this? Could you do that?" We've not seen that on your website. Those kind of, I hate the term red flags, but it kind of would be a bit red flaggy, and I wouldn't want to do that couple of disservice. And I I'd hate it if I was to like deliver a wedding gallery and the couple get something that they weren't expecting. So what you see on my website is what you get. It is occasionally I'll say it's like documentary photography, warts and all. I'm not gonna overly Photoshop things. You're gonna get your wedding how it looked to me and how it looked to you, and I want you to feel like you're at your wedding day again when you look back at these pictures in 20, 30, 40 years' time, or even in like 4 or 5 weeks' time when you first get the gallery through. I want you to be transported back to that day. I don't want you to go, who the hell's wedding is this? This doesn't, because I don't overly edit anything. You genuinely do get what's put in front of me on a wedding day. As the wedding day unfolds, I capture it. But I capture it in the only way I know how to, and it's done in a very conscious, arty way. But at the same time, when I do have to stage something, like say if we do the 10, 15 minutes of portraits, couple portraits, I'm never hands on. I'm never telling people where to put their limbs. I'm never saying, "Oh, you put your arm around here." No, be more specific. I'm literally just saying, "Go over there where that tree is. Hold hands, walk towards me, and look like you like each other." It's as simple as that. And if I have to make a bit of a dick of myself in the process to get them to relax or them their personality to come out, I will do that. Like I won't care about that as long as I get the shot and as long as I don't take too long or take too much of their day up.
Yeah, because I think your day is so short. The run up to it is so long because you're all so excited and there's lots going on. And then the day, in literally a blink of an eye, is gone. So, like that
Yeah,
15 minutes of like curated pictures compared to the whole 8, 10, 12 hours of like documentary pictures feels like actually quite a long time in that
yeah.
day.
It really does. Yeah, to some photographers, whenever I do like one-to-one tuition with photographers or when I've done workshops in the past, so many people, especially at the end of the day when I do a workshop and it gets to the Q&A section, and they're like, "Oh, you didn't really touch on your portraits. What are your prompts? What are you saying to couples?" And I'm like, I'm literally just being myself. I'm talking lots because I'm very fast moving. I'm very fast talking. I'm kind of taking the piss out of myself at sometimes just to get a reaction from them. And it's those in between moments or the reactionary shots of somebody hearing something that makes them giggle. And then if you don't get that shot, then what was the point of you like making a bit of a knob of yourself if you're going to miss it? You just constantly got to be on it. And it's one of those things where some photographers really, really obsess over the portraits, and for years they can think that they're doing something wrong technically, and it is not technical. It's not technically wrong at all. It's physically, it's common sense. It might be the fact that you're not talking to your couples enough. You're not making them feel relaxed around you. So if they're on edge, you're never going to get the best out of them. When I turn up on a wedding day, I don't turn up and go like that with the camera straight in front of their face, and they're instantly put off, aren't they? So I will instantly welcome myself into the room, and I'll introduce myself to people before I like pick up the camera, unless something amazing's happening as soon as I arrive and I have to capture it.
Wow, yeah, that just brings me on to a question that I've got for you. What is the best moment from a wedding you've captured?
Oh, blimey. There's so many. The best documentary, the best moment. I would probably go back to me saying that I'm not a fine art photographer, but the emotional, when something emotional happens, that kind of affects me deep down. I'm quite an emotional person, very in touch with my bit sensitivity and all that. And if I see like a moment between like grandma and a bride, or like a father and a bride when they're having like the first look in the morning when they do like the reveal of a dress. Or I've done weddings before where a bride hasn't got a dad and mum's been there to either walk her down the aisle or even a first look with mum. And there've been such emotional times. You're like honoured to be in the room with them at that time. And sometimes you look around and you're like, shit, I'm the only one here. And those two people, I've got the pressure's on to get something good, but at the same time, there's no pressure because you're just documenting what's happening. And if what's happening is like tear jerking and hitting you in the feels and making you feel personally emotional, and these people were strangers 2 hours ago, you know that you're capturing something fantastic. And I'd say, yeah, the best moments for me, and luckily for me, there's been a lot of like blokes crying as well. I love a bloke crying shot. If a bloke is crying during the ceremony, I'm like straight in on the guy, and it's 9 times out of 10 you look at their partner and they're like, oh god, he's crying, and I'm like, this is brilliant. So I would say as much as like the fun element of weddings is where my heart lies, it's the emotional things that are my favourite moments.
It's so nice. It's like you forget about those little moments. You actually just brought me back to our wedding and my other half. As me and my dad walked down the aisle, you could see me and my dad as we were getting stressed. Our shoulders were creeping more and more towards our ears. And then Nath just started crying. And like my other half, 6'3", skinhead, beard, tattoos, looks hard as anything, but he's soft as shit. And he just started crying and he was like, oh. And I remember him just tearing up and I was like, oh.
It is, yeah. I'm always surprised. It's always the ones that you don't expect to be the emotional ones that surprise me. I've done like when a bride wants a picture of, oh, dad's coming in, you've got to get a picture of this before you bugger off to the church for the ceremony or the venue. You got to get, dad's going to be in bits. When he sees me, he's going to be a mess. And then sometimes dad walks in, he's like, you're all right, come on, the cab's going to be here in a minute. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm running late to get to the church. And for that, I've just been stood there doing nothing for 30 minutes. And then you look at the bride and the bride's like traumatized because they're just like, is that it? I thought he was going to be a bit. Yeah, you said he was going to be a bit. I'm off. And then you have to drive like a rallycross driver to get to the church on time. So it works both ways. It's kind of why I go into weddings with a very open mind and never a preconceived idea of how the wedding's going to be. And it's kind of, I never used to sleep the night before weddings because I used to overthink. I would, in my head, it would play out. We're only talking like 8-9 years ago. I would play out in my head. I'd be lying in a hotel room, and because I'd met the couple, I would be playing out how the day was going to pan out, what the weather was going to be like. And then I just shot so many weddings, I just realized it never works out like that. You just got to go into every wedding like it's the first and last wedding you'll ever shoot. and then that's how I sleep the night before a wedding now, and it's what leaves me excited even after all these years. So I'm going into this day, and it's a new day, it's a fresh day, it's a fresh couple, and anything can happen. And when you're a documentary photographer, knowing that anything can happen just keeps you so alert, because you're not relying on the contrived fake fun that other photographers might enhance by creating themselves. If that makes any sense, it's something that it's never interested me to create the fake fun. If you're doing something and you feel it's like irking you, or it's just it just doesn't sit right with you, that's when as a true documentary photographer, you're like, yeah, this isn't real life, is it?
Yeah, and I think, well, I'm a personal hater of enforced fun. So, like, I hate it, even down to like Christmas, and people are like, you should be happy, and I'm like, no, I don't want
Yeah,
to just,
why are you smiling? Yeah.
yeah, like, just no, catch me like when I'm having a laugh, like off,
Yeah,
not focusing
the
on
real
whatever I'm supposed to be.
yeah the real moments
Yeah,
that I always kind of say that I capture the moment, but I also allow the moment to happen and finish. So I'll go in, I'll make sure I capture it, but I would never want the moment to end while I'm taking the photos. I'd like to get away. And then that's why when you deliver a gallery and then the couple's just like, oh, holy crap, we didn't even know you were there when that happened, yet let alone you captured a photo of it. That's brilliant. So exceeding people's expectations is like the name of the game with like successful wedding photography, in my opinion, anyway.
yeah. It's like, it's always nice to see the gallery, I think, and then be like, whoa, like you say, like, oh, I didn't even realize you were there. Like, that's the part of a good wedding photographer as well. I think they should be able to be a little bit sneaky and like go in the
Yeah,
crowd and take lots of nice shots and then ping back out again. Like,
yeah, hide in the shadows.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So that brings me on to another question. What's the hardest part about being a wedding photographer?
The hardest part, blimey, there's where to begin? I'd probably say managing people's expectations, and that kind of begins when the couple that are looking for you or looking for a wedding photographer land on your website. So you've got a massive responsibility as a wedding photographer to get your website correct and to really, really be honest with people. But if you're not honest on your website, you're setting yourself up for a fall, because if you're just putting anything on your website to get as much work, you're setting yourself up for a massive fall, and you will fail very quick and very hard. So just be really, really honest on your website. Spell it out to people, educate people about how you work, and also things you do like about weddings, and be honest and say about things you don't like. I've, over the last few years, started saying things that don't particularly float my boat about weddings, like mainly endless group photos. I'll do 5 or 6, but we'll do them in 10 minutes and we'll rattle through them and we'll get them out and nobody will have an argument about them. So just being honest about that. So I'd say the hardest thing about being a wedding photographer is just managing people's expectations, because at the end of the day, it's like choosing a wedding photographer or even getting married. It's not like doing your Friday online shop, is it? It's not something you do every week. It's hopefully for most people it's a once in a lifetime thing.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. I think it must be so hard to work with people who, I remember I was quite stressed out, and like there's a lot of heightened emotion around weddings. So that must
Yeah,
be quite hard to
yeah. But again, that's if you're
navigate.
not, yeah, if you're not a people. Luckily, the biggest thing I took away from being a press photographer for 12 years was I'd like to think even when I started when I was 17 years old, I was somewhat of a people person then, but I was ridiculously shy when I was 17. I was probably still ridiculously shy at the end of my 4 years working at the first local newspaper, but I would have progressed and I just became a real hard grafter. I worked really bloody hard because I was so obsessed with the job. But at the same time, my anxiety was through the roof. I used to get so stressed, like so nervous on jobs. And then I would just pick up the camera and it was like a shield. It was just like you'd do the job, and then the camera would just like hide all the stresses. And as soon as you go away from the job, you'd be like, what was I worried about? A bit like when you're at school and you don't want to go to school, but the parents are always just like, it'll be all right when he gets there. And now I've got kids of my own. The amount of times I'm just like, they'll be all right when they get, dropped them off. They were fine. They were fine once they went in the school gates.
Yeah, I think you're right there. The anxiety sometimes is worse than actually just getting on with it and doing it.
Yeah, it's just because the only pressure you feel is the pressure that you're putting on yourself. And that can be such a bigger pressure than any couple would give you. I mean, over the last 2 or 3 years, I don't know whether it's because I share more of kind of my personality, myself, my personal life on social media, that people kind of know what they're getting on the day, and they treat you more like a friend, which is it's dynamite. It's just brilliant. I love it when people like refer to something that was mentioned on my Instagram like 8 months ago, but they'll mention it at bridal prep. I'm like, bloody hell, are they stalking me? And then you just it's not stalking. It's social media, isn't it? It's just them paying an interest in the person that they've paid a lot of money to spend 10, 12 hours with on a very important day of their life, where emotions are going to be raised to the next level, so that they like to feel like they kind of know you, and I like to feel like I kind of know them before the day's even started as well.
Yeah, I think definitely now people want to see who you are. I'm definitely finding that with my own social media, actually. People are
Yeah,
finding they want to see a bit of you, even if it's
yeah,
just like me dicking around. Like today, I've like annoyed my photographer a tiny bit because I was doing like a day in the life of like me just going to work. So, and all I was doing was styling massive, ginormous granny pants on a mannequin today. So it wasn't anything
yeah.
interesting, but I know that like people want to see you and want to see your face and want to kind of know,
They
they
really
kind of
do.
book you for your skills and your personality.
Yeah, no, I totally get that, and I know some photographers are really, really good at doing. The one thing that I don't do on social media, I don't do any like to camera talking, just because, well, hey, I don't like my own voice, my monotone West Country voice, but also just because I can talk in a conversation like this, or I can talk to somebody at a wedding very openly, but when you're instantly thinking about almost like staging saying something, and you're coming out with something, it just doesn't come across genuine to me, and I can never put anything out there on social media if I don't think it's genuinely me. If somebody was catching me off guard and they like pretty much shoved a microphone in my face, and I'd had a couple of drinks and I was probably relaxed enough to like give out a load of spill, it'd probably be all right. But I'm just not good at doing like reels where you're just talking to camera. So I'd much rather put some pictures up and then a very long caption, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, the one I'm gonna edit that I've been doing today, it'll just have music over the top of it because no one needs to hear me droning on. Poor photographer, me droning on for like 6 or 7 hours today, so no one else needs to hear it.
All right.
um, so you also mentioned that you're planning another workshop as well. Can you tell me a bit more
Yeah,
about that?
yeah. Well, I've not done one for 5 years, and the last one I did was when I had a studio in Nottingham back in 2019, and then COVID happened, and I've just never got round to doing another one since. I do lots of one-to-one mentoring. I do training days here at my home in Nottinghamshire, but yeah, I am going to put on a workshop at the end of this year, and it's going to be very documentary photography based about the storytelling aspects of the day. So I'm looking forward to doing that. I'm compiling it. There's not going to be like I've done in the past where there's been a styled shoot during the day, because, well, documentary photography isn't a styled shoot. So it'd be a bit disingenuous of me to impart that on a documentary photography workshop. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to doing that, and I just need to find. Well, I've got a couple of venues in mind for doing it. It's just as to how successful the amount of tickets I sell for it is. I've done them in the past where it's just been 10 attendees, and that's been a nice number. But if more people want to join on to it when I launch it on Instagram, I'll either do a second day or I'll get a bigger venue.
Yeah. Do you get quite a lot of interest in those? Did you get quite a lot of interest in those before, like in 2019?
Yeah, I did. I used to do two a year back when I had the studio, and we did 3 years of that. So we put on, I think we put on four or five of them, and then it kind of tailed off a bit just because lots of other people were every man and his dog's doing workshops at the moment. So it's kind of why I've not been doing them for the last few years, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's good. I go to other workshops. I went to one last year. I went to one a Leica workshop last year with Jason Lee, the American actor and photographer. That was down in Mayfair. And then I've done two this year. I did a Fuji one down in London. And then a few weeks later, I did the Photography Farm Thrive event, which was down in London. And they're both brilliant. I mean, even after nearly 30 years in this business, I'm still investing in education, and I'm still willing to learn more. And I mean, I can't just be expected to know what TikTok is. I need to go on a workshop to have somebody spell it out to me, and then for me to say, "Oh, is that for me or isn't it for me?" And then me make my own decision. And also things with like Google SEO, you can always learn more from things like that. But the workshops that I put on are all more definitely not tech based, but they're more about the techniques. Not rather than technical terms, it's more about techniques and how I talk to couples, how I get the couples that I want to book me to actually book me, educating them again, and then just how I see certain images. So the one that I want to do in October is definitely going to be a day of me dissecting a hell of a lot of my favorite documentary style wedding images. And I'm really looking for. I've been curating the ones that I'm going to show, and it's really excited me. I've not been this excited about doing a workshop ever, just because it's so different to the other workshops I've done. I'm going to be giving away a hell of a lot of like kind of my tips and tricks as to. I give a lot away on my social media anyway. I couldn't give a shit about people copying or whatever. You can only copy documentary photography to a degree. I mean, I must have copied or taken inspiration from certain people to get to working out my style. So I like doing workshops and just giving a bit back as well, and just meeting other photographers. It's all I learn stuff as well. It's not a one way situation. It's like the questions you get back off the attendees makes you think sometimes. It's just like, yeah, why did I do it like that? And then you start dissecting the picture that you're already dissecting, and then you're like, oh yeah, maybe I did position them over there, or maybe I did wait for the light, or maybe I did like zone in on this area for longer than I'm saying I did. So I find them really interesting doing them. Whether I'd want to get into education on a full-time basis, I don't think. Well, never say never, but at the same time, I just really enjoy shooting weddings and being able to tell people how I see certain images.
Yeah, it must be so cool as well to see someone else's perception of your shot and then getting that feedback back as well is kind of invaluable.
Yeah, I sometimes get that from Zoom calls. I had one of the couples that booked me last week. As much as I say I'm a shit salesman, they did actually book me at the end of the Zoom call. They said, "Oh no, we don't need to think about it. We just wanted to have a Zoom call just to make sure that we gelled and that you weren't a knob." So they just wanted the Zoom call to make sure that I existed, if anything. And I sometimes at the end of Zoom calls, I think, well, I've got the booking. Why don't I do a bit of market research now? We've got another 10, 15 minutes left. So I just said to them, oh, which of my pictures was it that stood out for you? And both of them, they just said your slideshow on your homepage. And I hear that so often. And when I do one-to-ones, with other photographers, and even when I do the workshop, my biggest selling point, my biggest marketing point, it has been for years, is my slideshow on my homepage. It's only 3-4 minutes long, but it's really punchy. People's attention spans nowadays are just so short. You've got such a limited time to hook somebody in. So I just know the importance of a really decent slideshow on your homepage near the top. Tell them that it's only a few minutes long, and then just grab your ideal client. You might get somebody looking at it, and after 15 seconds they'll go, "Oh, this isn't for me," and that's fine. That's kind of what I want. I don't want to waste people's times, and it's kind of about the whole ethos of just being as honest as you can on the whole website. And if that honesty starts on the homepage with like an amazing slideshow that shows off show reels your work, I can't think of a better selling point. Can you?
No, and I think that's something that I think is going to be quite valuable for other people as well who are listening, because I think often we as creatives overthink a lot of our work, and actually sometimes you've just got to get it out there, because the right people will book you on what they see, not on like your curated like tight version that actually you might think you've agonized over for hours and days, and actually you've probably got better work as well if you take a step back.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, I'm a massive overthinker about certain things, but luckily on a wedding day, my mind and brain is very, very empty. It's insanely dead up there on a wedding day. I'm just it's what's unfolding in front of me, and muscle memory really come into it. I haven't got everything. It's chaos at times, but that chaos is generally because of the chaos that you're shooting. Like a bridal prep, when you turn up to it, sometimes I leave bridal prep and I need 2 paracetamol because it's just been like 10, 15, 10, 15 women all just screaming and there being so much stress. And then the next week you could do bridal prep and it might just be a bride in an Airbnb treehouse getting ready, overlooking a field, and she's doing her hair and makeup, and it's the complete opposite to what you had a week before. And you're like, oh, this is bliss. But that to me is as cool as the chaos that I had the week before, because all I've got to do is capture what's in front of me in a very honest and true way, and what you see is what you get. And then job done. The bride or the groom, the couple, they're going to be happy with those images because that'll take them back to that. But with overthinking other stuff, sometimes I leave weddings and I'm like, did I get this? Did I get that? Did that happen? Or that didn't happen, did it? But on the actual wedding day, it's chaos in front of the eyes, empty up here.
Probably the best way to be, though, to be honest.
Just whatever happens, and you just got to make sure that you're switched on and that you capture it. And in the past, when I've had like second photographers in the early days, some second photographers were just like, I'm exhausted watching you work. They'd say to me, because they'd just see how manic I'd be, just because I'd just be seeing something happening over here, and then I'll be like, oh, I've got to get that. Whereas now it's kind of just like, you just got to calm it down a bit. You got to take a deep breath, and then you just got to think about not burning yourself out as well. You can't be everywhere. We're not robots. We're human beings. We can only be where the action is at certain times, and sometimes it can be you can look like you're walking around as if you're just one of the guests with 2 very expensive cameras and you're not really doing much. But sometimes there really is bugger all happening at a wedding. Like you can go 45 minutes when they're transitioning like a room from the afternoon, from the dinner to the evening, and sometimes nothing is happening for 45 minutes. If you're wandering around and there's nothing to shoot, don't just keep getting up. Don't just do it just to look busy. Chat to the guests. Just be friendly. Think about the shots that might be happening soon on the dance floor. See if they change the lights, or I might need to go and get a flash from the car. But it's this is why the day after a wedding I'm useless. I'm just a mess because I've been I'm physically and mentally drained the day after a wedding. I mean, luckily, this year I've only got one back-to-back wedding, a double header, and I've already shot it. It was the second and third. So I've shot 3 weddings already this year. So the second and third weddings, I had one in Northampton, then one in London. And I had a second shooter for the one in London, Katie. She second shot with me. But then, like the day after that, I was just wiped out, just because it's the day after a wedding. If you're not wiped out, I don't think you've been working hard enough. So I'm very thankful for the fact that I haven't got any double headers left this year.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Like, I get wiped out at a wedding, probably because of the alcohol, but it's quite a
As a
big,
guest.
they're just quite big events, aren't they? Yeah, as a guest, let alone, you know,
Yeah, they
shooting
are
it.
they are they
Um,
are they are really full on days. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, they really are. I've got one final question for you, Ed, and you can answer it like however which way you see fit. But what
Okay.
inspires you?
What inspires me? Okay. Well, probably a couple of music videos have always inspired me, and I've had people say in the past when they've looked at some of my slideshows from certain weddings, like London weddings, especially not just because of the music I put, but because the way that I shoot a lot of weddings, it can be quite edgy and quite raw, quite in your face, wide angle, and that you kind of get that with a lot of music videos. They want to be bold. Everything needs to be really dynamic. And I like to think that my documentary photography is quite dynamic and bold. But the main thing that kind of inspires me is street photography. And I like to think that sometimes when I'm shooting weddings, you almost feel like a street photographer at a wedding. But the good thing about that is you've been paid to be there and the people know that you've been paid to be there. So they're expecting a photographer to be taking photos. Whereas when you've got like the famous street photographers, or even like the not so famous street photographers, but the ones that do it well, that they're taking shots of strangers with the thought of like possibly being told off for taking the photos. Well, you don't get told off many times at a wedding for getting in somebody's face and taking a cool street photography style wedding photo at a wedding. Plus, at a wedding, everyone's hopefully happy, and they want you to be there as much as they want to be there. So yeah, I'd definitely say street photography and music videos really inspire me.
That's a really lovely answer. I've not had anybody say that either of those yet, actually. That's a really nice
Haven't you?
answer. And I
Okay,
think
cool.
you're right. I think street photography. No, no. And I think I can see the influence of street photography in your photography as well, in the way you're capturing people.
Yeah, I do look. I've got quite a few books of street photography, and I do dip into them. Just coffee table books. And I do look into them. I look at them for more inspiration than I do other wedding photographers. When if I look at other wedding photographers' work, I will just instantly be like, I'm shit now. I'm crap. Just because just because I'll be looking at the same work, I'll be thinking I should be producing this, and then I never want imposter syndrome to kick in. But that's the only time it would kick in if you're looking at other people within your industry. And I mean, the other week I judged a recent round of the documentary wedding photography site, and there was the standard of work on there was unbelievable. It was just so good. You're scrolling through like hundreds of pictures, and like, oh my god, this is so hard to choose from. Everyone's really good now, and as another wedding photographer, I should be bricking it, thinking, oh god, I'm getting pushed out of the market here. But at the same time, you're impressed that the quality of work's so good, and it's out there. And if I'm not taking inspiration from seeing these, you're going to be a pretty bitter old fool, aren't you? Where you're just jealous of everyone else's work. So I'm looking at it, and I'm just impressed by how good the work is nowadays. And the good thing about social media, Instagram, and all the other platforms that are picture based is the fact that we can only take inspiration from them if you're looking at them and you're comparing yourself and you're using them for comparison's sake. That's a massively negative way to use social media, isn't it? You've got to try, and if you're only taking negative things away from having that in front of your eyes all the time, you need to come off it, have a break from it, just step away, or just massively cull a lot of the photographers that you follow.
Yeah, yeah, it's you're so right. You literally hit the nail on the head, because I think if we're looking at stuff that other people within our industry are doing and going like, oh, I wish that was me, but actually they might also be looking at your stuff and being like, oh, I
Yeah.
wish I'd done that.
It's more than likely they are. Yeah, I've had somebody come on one of my workshops before, and I was just like, wow, they want to come on my workshop, and then you see either a huge compliment or you're massively looking into their work with very different eyes. But especially if they shoot in a very different style, it's like the biggest compliment going, isn't it? I had one year where I shot 5 of the weddings that I shot were all wedding photographers' weddings. And a lot of my mates were just like, bloody hell, aren't you nervous about shooting their weddings? And I was just like, well, I'm not. I wasn't until you've mentioned it. But now I'm just thinking, well, that's a compliment, because if they want me to be photographing the wedding, they clearly like my style of photography. The only people that you have to be worried about then is what you're looking at the tables and you're like, oh, that's a table full of wedding photographers. What are they all thinking? And then that's when you get paranoid, and then that's when I'm a bit of an overthinker.
Yeah, I can imagine I'd be like shitting myself, to be honest.
Yeah, I wish I was a guest.
Yeah. Like, why am I working and you lot not?
Yeah, it's not fair.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation and I really love your work. So it's been a joy to chat to you tonight.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. No, it's been really good. I always love chatting about something that I'm so passionate about. So thank you very much for asking me on.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please rate, follow and share, as it really helps this little podcast out. And if you have found value in the podcast and you have the means to, I do have a Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. This will help keep the podcast going. Join me next week for another fantastic guest. Bye!